All right. Good evening, everyone.
Mm.
So, this week, I believe, is going to be our last and final week together as a group. Um, Overall, I've enjoyed this experience. This has been a wonderful group that I've never had like a Zoom group online like this ever before. So this was like really cool. It was much better than I anticipated it being as far as like doing it virtually. So it's really cool, and it went by so fast, but here we are. So let's go ahead and get into the discussion. So this week, for our discussion is going to be on the case related to the fear over emissions policy at Popular Virginia Magnet School. The question says, given all the acrimony, design a 5-point plan to submit to Dominic to increase diversity at TJ. So, to get started, this case is about Dr. Dominic, um, who I believe started at the Fairfax County Superintendent's to propose a new initiative procedure. This meeting that he called was in regards to diversity and inclusion. Just a quick overview, Thomas Jefferson High and Fairfax County, Virginia, they were facing a lot of problems related to the school's diversity, and it wasn't proportional to the actual composition of the demographics in the area. So Dr. Daniel Dominic, he was sort of the person in charge to sort of solve this problem for the district um, as the school superintendent. But while he was working to solve this diversity problem at Thomas Jefferson High School in Fairfax County, um, he encountered a lot of administrative issues that burdened him with a lot of problems by the same community that he was trying to serve. So, although the community didn't reflect the admission of the school, and that was something that he felt was a pressing issue that needed to be addressed, he was faced with a lot of pushback from the community trying to fix that. So Dominic, he had to portray different types of leadership styles and sort of include an overall inclusive approach to propose the solutions that he was met with a lot of resistance about. So the 5-point plan that I think that he should come up with to get over the adversity would be first is to just listen to everyone's concerns originally and just see why there's so much resistance to promoting something that would be deemed a positive thing for the community. Next, I would ask that they um, explain and elaborate sort of what Dr. Dominic's vision is for the community. I think that he also should work with other community stakeholders in the area that reflect the demographics of the community in order to make sure that the people that are promoting his new initiatives reflect the same community that they come from. Another thing that I would do is I would work with other school districts and sort of come up with a pilot program to ensure that the diversity and inclusion is something that'll be able to be fostered, not just within the Fairfax County School District, but can be adopted hopefully on a larger level as well. But it would take a lot of community buy-in on a larger scale to solve some of the problems that Dr. Dominic is trying to address. But I think that he needs to approach it in a different manner and make sure that the people that are causing a lot of the resistance are brought in to the table and sort of have their concerns addressed, which I think would sort of help quell some of the concerns of the diversity problem that he's trying to fix. So those were pretty much like my 5 overall points that I think that he should be using to increase diversity at Thomas Jefferson High in Fairfax.
All right, I'll go next. Came up with, could you, I don't have it in front of me. If you could, Anthony, could you restate the discussion question?
Yeah. The discussion question says, given all the acrimony, design a 5-point plan to submit to Dominic to increase diversity at Thomas Jefferson High.
All right, well, my 5-point plan would be this. Started off with the changing demographics, point to the need for a new reflective representative administrative process. And I think that's just because with more African American and Latinos and coming into the area, the admissions process should reflect demographics of a growing population or a growing diverse population. Next, it would be more schools like Thomas Jefferson or TJ are needed. And they need to add more GT centers. Third would be privately funded programs like Quest School should be maximized. Then actually I have more than 5. So here we go. Explore what programs are available to the FCPS to prepare students earlier. And then seek more private sector funding and more private sector funding that is not subject to legal exposure. And then just to remind everybody that affirmative action contributed to the school's legacy of excellence. So it should be a point to sure that the school reflects some of the diversity that was experienced during the heyday of the school, because I was part of the legacy. Having African American and Latino kids in the school promoted or added to the excellence of the school in the first place. And then the last one I would say, and this is probably the most important one, because you have the affluent families that are basically being the political opposition to bringing diversity to the school. I would say there needs to be, for the application process, there needs to be a percentage of the people selected to participate in the application process need to come from low-income families, which would basically automatically put more diversity into the initial 800 students that get that are approved for the application. And that's all I have.
I have some similar points to both of you. My first one, which I felt was the most important, was community involvement, specifically of the low-income minority families, and also to get teams like the NAACP aboard, because I know that he was talking about how he expected them to come out to the meeting and support in much larger groups. Unfortunately, they didn't. So I think that you need to have buy-in with them so they can see the importance in this as well. I know he talked about how they were busy with other things that were more important at that time, but you need to be able to emphasize why this is so important and why they need to support it, because the administration is siding with those opposed to it, opposed to diversity, because their voice is louder. They're there showing up. They're there saying, no, we don't want it. They're showing up. So you need to get someone from your team who sees the potential and the importance of diversity to show up as well. It's kind of like, when like hate is really loud, like you need to be louder than that and try to make your point. So my second one is to incorporate more classes and clubs in the other schools that are not set for the TJ high school. And I know that they prep before, like they have classes specifically to enable them to get prepped for the exam to get into TJ High School. So I think that's something important to incorporate in the other middle schools as well, and to incorporate more clubs. I know that he talked about how they did a club specifically for African American and Latinos in the other middle schools, and they had to take it away, and they found it again, but this time it was through private funding, so that way there wouldn't be a lawsuit or anything. So I think that's smart. I just think that you need to increase that. I This is kind of a little off course because this one's specifically to Latino population. I said that the exams should be giving in Spanish as well. I know that he spoke about how he had high intelligence and he understood the information, but his English was slow to develop to his intelligence. And that's why in high school he wasn't given the opportunities he should have been given. So my thought process is if you give him the exams in Spanish, which is mathematical, and also the writing portion of it, they can see the potential of like, this kid is very smart, his IQ or his intelligence is at the level that is at the school. It's just there's a language barrier. And for that, you would have Spanish classrooms designated specifically for that. I know it's a science and math school, so it would be that. And it would also help them practice their English, because while they're learning science and math, they can learn the vocabulary and the terminology in English. So that way it'll help them increase their English as well. And then I put my number 4 is like tours at TJ, because I know he said that there was a point where the applications of minorities, specifically African American and Latinos, were higher, and that was because of the publicity around the school. So they were trying, after they found out about the school, because a lot of them didn't know, they were trying to get in, and then the next year it dropped. So I think it's kind of just making sure that you are constantly intriguing them and getting their attention, because realistically you can't increase your diversity if they are not applying. You know, if there's very low numbers applying and very even lower numbers getting in, then there's no way to increase that diversity. So the way to do it is that you need to make sure these students, these children, these families, that you catch their attention and that you see and you teach them what the benefit is about the school. And that would be the tours, so they can see the high tech they have, because I know they were talking about like this new technology they have. I think it was like human genetics. There's like all these things that I don't even know if my college, I don't even know if our college has that, but their high schools have it. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then my 5th one was kind of like about the ones that oppose diversity, and kind of just sitting down and have a conversation with them about the importance of diversity, not even in just the school setting, but also just in how it improve the lives of their children and get them better prepared for college. Because ultimately you can go and give them a story about why these kids deserve to be in the school as well, and they're too busy and caught up with their own students, with their own child, that they're like, okay, I get that, but my children need this education too, and my children need this and that. Because, you know, as a parent, your biggest job and your biggest worry is over your own children. So maybe also explain to them how it benefits their children as well, and preparing them for the real world and college overall, because, you know, that's the whole point of that school, was to get you better prepared for college. So those are my 5 points.
Okay, I'll go. I didn't come up with 5, but I'll give you the ones that I have. So the first one is to address disproportionate students. They need to make an effort to try to attract Hispanic and African American students. Even though there was some changes that were made that resulted in an increased number of minority applicants, but it said so too would increase the number of white applicants. So maybe design a system that accepts a certain number or percentage of applicants by each middle school. That way, if there are schools that have a higher percentage of minority students, then those students have a greater chance of getting accepted. So even if a school is in a more like blighted area, then maybe like the top 5% of those students from those schools can still get into TJ. I have build more of those GT schools, and this is much like you guys have already said, but more of these schools in more diverse areas of Fairfax County. The case said that there was 16 GT elementary schools and 10 GT middle schools in the county. Since there's a disproportionate number of minority TG attendees in those GT schools, signified a greater chance of getting accepted into TG, and there was greater competition for those spots. Building more lower level GT schools in those more diverse areas would level the playing field. I have built another magnet school similar to TJ. That if the original magnet school performed so well, and I think it even mentioned about how their first yearbook or something like that said, try to top this, because there's so many high performing students. And then there seems to be like a bottleneck of qualified students, because they also said that because they had the increased number of applicants over the years, it made it harder and harder to get into the school, and the requirements got tougher and tougher. So they required higher scores from their students. Then they should start funding for another school to try to take on those students. So essentially, 5 years later, the students that would have normally got in no longer would get themselves in, but comparatively to the students from before, they were equally as qualified. And then the successes and reputation of the first magnet school could be used as a basis for warranting another school, as the district has proven a proven record of how they can manage the school and produce results. And I believe they even said about how they were able to obtain funding. So that's what I was able to come up with.
I can go next. So for my part, the first one was talk to the school board about the concern. Well, actually the school board and the community about their concerns, because they're the ones that are kind of fighting against the change, even though the school board kind of brought Dominique on, but then when he's got to do the change, they kind of fight against him and go with the community. And if we kind of talked about what the concerns are, why they really don't want to diversify the school, like what do they think is going to happen? And then maybe we can come up with a plan there. And then from there, I think revising the entrance exam to make it like more cultural friendly. So if they put different things that different cultures know, that's kind of how the original entrance exam kind of disadvantaged minorities, because some of the terminology and things they're talking about, they wouldn't know about unless they grew up in a household like that. So if they made it kind of more culturally diverse, I think that could be kind of alleviate some of the argument, because they don't want to get rid of the exam. So if they kind of made it that worked for everyone and everyone had like an equal playing field, then maybe that could be a way to kind of change the diversity and get some minority students that are equally as intelligent in the school also, but just have like a little a block there. And then the third one I heard was like, once they did that, try to talk to the city council and the district about expanding the school. So I don't know how much room they have like to build another one. So I like to say expand it, or did an extra couple wings. Like maybe they can still have the same 800 from the affluent neighborhood in the newer wing, even though they'll do the same courses or the same school, just they can add that space to how many more kids that can come. So if they're like, okay, well, we need about 12% minorities, and whoever comes through, and they have more space, then that can alleviate some of the argument too. So the parents whose kids would have got in normally without having to be what they think replaced by somebody of color, everybody would be able to have a chance if they just expand it. And the last one is, I know once a new superintendent comes, they can switch everything and put it back like it was, because like try to change the whole policy. So it's not, so once they kind of figure it out and make them as diverse as they need to, or have like a flow, the more different cultures move into the area, that the school becomes more diverse. If they have a policy that kind of permanently changes it, they won't have to go around like to try to reverse it later on. And that's it.
Those are some good points that you made. I kind of had similar ones to what has been said. I kind of approach these 5 points they're kind of all over the place. So I try to address equity in the first point. So one of my first points was to offer full competent and advanced courses in general schools that don't include the gifted and talented centers. As in the article, it said that the gifted and talented centers led to an us versus them mentality. And I feel like that's why there's so much division in the, with the parents, and that's why there's so much division trying to include all these people that aren't getting in. So I feel like by addressing or having more advanced courses in the general school districts, they'll be able to kind of allow for those minority groups to get a better education and kind of enhance also all the schools within the district. Let me see, for my second point, I also included maybe focusing in, I think this was said in the article as well, to focus in diversifying all magnet schools as well. So if you allow for people that are minorities to get into these class or into the schools, I'm sorry, they also would have a better chance and possibility in getting into the Thomas Jefferson Center School. As Julian had mentioned, I think he had stated that to create private funded programs to assist the schools and minority. I thought that was a great idea. It seemed to work well when it was privately funded, just because it wouldn't receive the backlash. My fourth point was to create an extra or a bonus category, kind of similar to what Fatima had said, that well, yours was culturally, but I just created like an extra category where students can discuss their hardships and life events that they had encountered, so that way they have kind of they have like background. The people who are reviewing these applications know what type of student or applicant is applying to the schools. This kind of reminded me of a TED Talk that I had seen. It was about resumes, how there was this human resource director talking about silver spoons and scrapers, and she had mentioned that you can tell kind of in a resume if a person, you can distinguish a person who has like straight A's and who has good internships and has kind of had jobs that are all kind of similar. It would be categorized like a silver spoon that's kind of like hasn't had any hardships, whereas a scraper is a person who has who's disadvantaged and who has, you have seen in the resume that they're jumping from job to job, and they've kind of had to find their own, they've kind of had a fight for their position that as another applicant would have, like, for example, the silver spoon. So I think that's kind of what it reminded me of in creating that extra category. And in the fifth point, I included to try and decentralize the gifted and talented centers. In the article, it mentioned that there was a lot of one of the main reasons why the gifted and talented centers were created was because they wanted to focus all this technology and innovation that the school district wasn't able to keep up with. So if Dominic probably tries to address stating that we want all schools to kind of equally be to equally be up to date with technology, I think that kind of would allow parents to have an open mind in discussing how other institutions and schools could be more competitive within the district. And that's all I had.
I think it was like so hard about this, at least in my eyes. It was that, like, you know, every time I would come up with an idea, it's like, you need funding, or how's that pushback going to come back from that family that we've already seen, like those, you know, individual parents that are fighting against diversity and also have political connections with the board. So it was a really hard thing for me to actually sit down and be able to come up with ideas, because all I could think about was like everything that he tried that were amazing ideas, like the geographical things with the middle schools. I thought that was amazing, and I thought it was a fair chance for all, but then it was like so much opposition. And at the same time, I can see the opposition side as well. Like, you know, if my child, you know, is a straight A student and didn't get in, I would get hurt if someone who didn't have the same scores who didn't have as high scores got in. But then I think about like, well, your child, no matter what, has so much privilege. So if my child had that much privilege, I'd be like, it's okay, because I know my child, no matter what, has an opportunity that those children didn't have. But I feel like sometimes it's hard to see that because your eyes are, again, is just, you know, as a parent, you care the most in this whole world about your children and you want to set them up for success. So I think it's such a hard, it was really hard for me. I just wanted to share that it was really hard for me to sit down and get 5 points because I kept fighting myself because I was like, okay, well, this is what they're going to say to oppose it. And nope, there's no funding for that. And there's no way they're going to do that. Like, you know, so it's just kind of crushing my thoughts as I was trying to process it.
Yes.
Yeah, I like where, Jenny, what you were talking about, trying to come up with another category. I know, like, Melinda and Fatima, you guys touched on it too, but like, I like it. I wish there was a way, because it sounds like we're kind of like saying that there's also potential. And it's like, how do you measure like potential? And, you know, you can measure where the kids are at, and like kind of Jenny was saying, like the silver spoon, but, you know, even in the article talking about how he, you know, had to learn English basically as a second language, and you know, so you know, but the potential was there. It's just that he had a longer road to, you know, to travel in order to get there. So it's like, but there's not really a way to, you know, score potential or somebody's like inner drive. So, you know, I think you guys were like touching on it. Jenny, I know you said like another category, and I know Fatima, you kind of came up with something too. But it's that's what it kind of sounds like. It's like how, like, you know, you can score certain types of attributes of people, but there's other types where, you know, people overcome adversity and all that stuff. I mean, you hear stories about people who come from nothing and then they, you know, they'll, you know, they're just driven, you know, because they want it that much more. So that kind of seems like that's what's like missing is you can take the kids who were privileged and with the silver spoon, but you sometimes you're missing out on, you know, people who really might want it more. And I think it was maybe Melinda, you said about like tours, and maybe that might inspire some of the kids to want it, but it's like how you come up with a way to include those kids.
Your thought, Jenny, on like, you know, sharing personal stories, something like that extra thing. I was just thinking about like college applications. You look at that too. They're not just gonna go with the best grades, the best exams. You share your story, right? Like you think about like, why should you be in this program, or what can you bring into the school? Like tell us about yourself. And I feel like that's a big point of it. And if all you ever get is straight A's and you're in all these clubs, you know, it's not going to make a difference when everyone else has straight A's and is in clubs too. They're going to look for someone, like you said, Keith, that has that drive. It's like, well, if you've only had that silver spoon, how do we know that the minute that it gets hard, you're not going to just stop? No, this person has been through so much and has overcome so much and still is trying. And I think that's that. Again, how do we measure that? But again, that's like a good point. Those are the ones that, you know, end up doing amazing things.
Did they say at one point that like there was that panel that was supposed to review all the applicants, and they were supposed to like look at other things other than just the grades? It was like how, like, what is it, like other like clubs and activities and other things that you're a part of? Like maybe that should have been part more heavily weighted, because, you know, like you said, it's like, you know, there's those college applications where the kids get straight A's, but like you said, a lot of times they want to know, especially now, more now, it's like they want you to have, you know, community service. They want to know what other kind of clubs and all that stuff you're a part of. So it's like almost like they want to know, like, are you overall a good, well-rounded person, not just, you know, maybe you're book smart, but do you, you know, like you said, if you're hand given everything, or but you don't really want it that bad, and you're not willing to do anything above and beyond the basics to get it, then, you know, you're gonna miss out. So yeah, maybe that's something as a that those type of things should be more heavily considered.
I agree with you, Keith. I just wanted to, something you said just kind of brought to mind the fact that from an administrative, I think, level, I mean, this is just my take on it. Kind of, I think people kind of are cautious about stepping into issues of diversity and trying to diversify populations or communities, organizations. But we have to remember, like, and when I say that, I'm talking about offering extra help to people with people that are diverse, people, minorities, people with disabilities or whatever. The thing about it is we have people in the country, right, from the top administrator in the country, you know, we just found out that he paid somebody to take his SAT or something like that, you know, and then we have the other college scandal that's going on where people are, you know, affluent people with money are paying for their, you know, college. So I'm just, you know, you have to look at it, I think, from a level perspective and realize that I think what you said, Keith, about potential, I think all kids have potential. I think it's just a matter of how we funnel that potential. Do we funnel them to prisons, or do we funnel them into colleges like TJ, or college preparation like TJ, like that? And so I think we shouldn't be afraid to realize, hey, there is inequity when it comes to education all the way from kindergarten up. So we should, you know, be willing to stand up to the opposition that says, oh, we shouldn't have these affluent, because like Jenny said, affluent people, the truth of the matter, people with money do have more options. These kids might not have another option, you know what I'm saying? So, so it is, you know, important for us as leaders to recognize that, you know, we have to put our effort into making sure these kids have a chance from the earliest stages, you know. And I would say, as a person of color, I would say a lot of it has to do with, you know, we should start in the home. You know, we have to start in the home. We have to change we have to culturalize education in the Black community. You know, that's what I believe. You know, I think it's been kind of, you know, I could go on and on. I'm gonna stop right there. But my point is that we shouldn't be afraid to use our administrative power to make sure that people of color, people with disabilities, have a leg up.
Yeah, no, I agree, Julian. I think it was Melinda, you brought it up about with the you know, with the tours and all that stuff, and I think that's a good idea. And maybe that kind of like touches on what Julian was saying, was like tapping into that potential and maybe getting those kids at a young age to get the tour, or maybe even like some sort of like maybe like a mentorship program where some of the TJ school students can mentor some of these other kids that and maybe it's just something as simple as these younger kids are willing to sign up to take a tour, and then they can be mentored by some of these kids. And so maybe some of the underprivileged, disadvantaged, like Julian was saying, minority students that might not be otherwise inspired or have or even be aware of this is something that could be available to them. It might make them, you know, strive for that. And if it's at a young enough age that they can, you know, 5 years before or whatever it is, that might give them that drive to make them want to be a good student, make them want to shoot for those straight A's, and make them a more of a viable candidate.
I agree with a lot of what you all said. One thing I think that Dr. Dominic could have did better was sort of just articulate his vision a little better to the actual community, especially with him being an immigrant and coming from poverty and attaining all the way education all the way up to a PhD. I think he could have did a better job inspiring a vision that could have been shared by the middle majority of the affluent class of the people that were predominantly being represented at the school. I don't think he wholly accomplished that task. And the whole concept of like separating children into different schools based upon their achievements was a part of the admission policy that he was trying to change. But he ultimately didn't get to change it all the way into what he wanted to change the system to. He couldn't really use a direct approach for enhancing the cultural diversity due to like reverse discrimination lawsuits, which is what caused the entire system to change. So he really had to like adapt his approach to like circumvent any opposition that was coming from these well-connected, affluent families that knew people on the board, and it was just a real politically toxic environment that he had to navigate in order to reach the desired outcomes and goals that he was trying to attain. And these constraints led to a lot of workarounds that would only be effective by promoting affirmative action in the long run and other measures that needed to be done. But he wasn't really convinced in his approach, and he went and talked with a lot of people. But overall, I think that his vision was narrow and focused because he wasn't able to convey the benefits of what a more diverse student body would look like and how it would benefit the affluent parents who were, really like self-centered about, making sure that their students were guaranteed a spot into that high school so that one day they would be able to attend like an Ivy League college. His Dominic's vision didn't appeal to them, and I think that his leadership and collaboration would have went a lot further if he would have been able to sort of tell his story a little bit more and his background. And I think if he should have, like how Julian was talking about earlier, just show them the benefits of how by pulling up these other kids in the community, help everyone else as a total in a collective, I think that it would have been a lot better. But that was just a few thoughts I was thinking from the comments that you guys just made.
I was thinking about something. I know, Anthony, I have this class with you, and I don't think that's, I think that's it. The one that's like liberty and equality can't go hand in hand.
Right, yeah, it's PAC.
That's what's, yeah, and I feel like that's what's going on here. They've had so much liberty, they've had so much privilege that the thought of having to share it and having everyone actually have some equity scares them because they know they won't get the piece of pie that they're used to.
Right.
I think that's why there's such a big opposition. But then when I think about what that dad did with the article, and that he pointed out that 10 out of the 11 African American students didn't even place on the lower 800s of the score when it came to the test, I was just vivid. Like, I was just so upset with that. I was livid. Like, literally, I was so upset. I was just like, if that was my child and you're putting that out there and you're causing my child to get bullied, I would go in and have a word with the principal and the board district and this whole, well, it's my freedom. It's my right. I have freedom of speech. No, but now you're causing problems. And I think the reason why it doesn't happen is because, again, these are from minority neighborhoods, even minority families that aren't as educated, so they don't know that they can speak up. They don't have that, they don't feel like they have that right because they don't know that that's a thing. It's like, well, what happened. They probably don't even know it happened. But I was just so upset with that, and the fact that there wasn't any consequences to that you're just advocating and you're allowing for these kids to be bullied, and now they feel like they don't have the right to be at that school when they do. Under the rules that were at that time, they had that right, and you are no one to say that they don't.
Right. Exactly. Oh yeah, it goes back to a discussion we were having about liberty versus equality, and it was just talking about how traditional American culture prefers liberty over equality. So if all 6 of us in this group right now, if we were like in a contest to get into like some sort of club or something like that, if there was a chance for the best people to get in on their best merits, liberty would just say, okay, I have the best resources, I have the best tools, I can finish this race faster than everyone else, I can win. But equality would say, okay, well, we can all finish at the same time, or we can share the spoils equally so that no one is left out. And it was basically saying that like liberty is preferred more in traditional American culture over equality because we have that sort of sense of, if I work hard, I can reap those benefits from society. And I see like that same thing with the attitude coming from the opposition to Dr. Dominic's diversity plan, because these affluent parents feel like, oh, well, I've put all this money and time and investment in for my kids to have the best and brightest things, and they should be able to do it. But Dr. Dominic is thinking more from an equality aspect of what would be better for the community, sort of like it takes a village approach. I mean, both make sense, but I mean, it all really depends on what you believe is morally okay and what is personal preference. But I mean, it's a really interesting balance between the two, which I never really thought about, but it's a prime example in this case study today.
Have you guys ever seen that video where this guy brings a bunch of people to a park and he lines them all up and he says, he holds up $100 bill. And he goes, I'm gonna have you guys race from this end of the park to the other end, and the first person to get there wins the $100. But he says, but before we start, he starts asking him questions. He starts saying like, okay, if you like have this, then you take like 2 steps forward. If you have this, then you take another 2 steps forward. And so like what happens at the end of the questions is you got some people still back at the original start line, and some people, got more advantage and they got to take all those steps forward. And he's like, okay, like we're gonna start this race. Is everybody okay with that? And everybody's like, no, these guys are way up here. So it's kind of like what you were saying. It was like some of these people had some of the privilege or the benefit of being able to jump ahead. And he's asking, okay, like, does this sound fair to everybody to win the money? And everybody's like, no, because obviously there's no equality. That just made me think of that when you were talking.
Yeah, no, I seen that video before a few times, and that is like so true. Like, it's a really good video. If I find the link to that, I'm gonna send it to you guys in the group. But yeah, like, it was really interesting. That video was deep. It was super deep.
I think what hurt me most about that video, it's the fact that it's like such small things that make such a huge difference that people don't think it's a big deal. And it's things that you find commonly like in minorities, right? So it's like if your parents have an education, take 2 steps up. If you know anyone that has an education, take 2 steps up. And it's like if you have a 2-parent household, take a step up. If you have a house, take a step up. You see all these things. There's just basic things that you would want for every single child, but they don't have it. And it's true, those small things that people don't think it's a big deal, because it's like, oh, well, it's not like they're rich. Yeah, but you have 2 parents, you have a 2-house income, and you have people that who succeed, and some people don't. These little small things are really huge, and that's still privilege.
And I believe they were all things that had nothing to actually do with the person participating in the race. Like you said, it was like, if your parents are still together, if one of your parents is college educated, it was all things that didn't have anything to do with them as a person. It was all external stuff that put them at an advantage or disadvantage.
No. Wow.
Or just to tie it back in, it'd be like the same thing for getting accepted into the school, which would be other things that these kids have no control over that gives them either advantage or disadvantage of getting into the school.
Yeah, that is true.
I think that's how the system works in America, period. It's like, it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Right.
Like when you think about how these people, these senators and presidents and all these things, it's like they already come from money, most of them. I know some of them don't. I'm not going to say all of them. But, and some of them come from highly educated parents, and parents who've already been in the Senate, parents who are already political, and just generations. And then, so it's, again, it's like those connections make everything, that networking. Even you can be the brightest person in this world, and it doesn't mean that you're gonna make it, because that's not how it works. Like, even though we say we're individualistic, no, we're not.
Definitely true. All right, so it is 7:07. Let's go ahead and switch over to discussion question number 2, about Screened In by Dr. Silard. And the question reads, discuss with the group the Heart of Darkness challenge you have been engaged with during this course, at a minimum in your weekly reflection journals, and if you desire, for extra credit, with 2 journal entries per week. What you have learned from it, if anything. Do you feel it has been a worthy use of your time and energy, or waste of time? Why? How will it influence you? how will you approach public service leadership, if at all? So for the first question, for myself, what I have learned from it, I would say what I've learned from the Heart of Darkness challenge would be how much I actually use my phone. Um, I never really like tracked it or had any metrics on that before. So, I mean, that's one thing that it certainly did is just bring a really big spotlight onto the amount of usage that I utilize my phone and what I'm using it for. Like, if I'm picking up my phone now, I'm more of like, is this going to be productive? Like, why am I just scrolling? Why am I looking at my news feed again? I've seen all this stuff earlier. So like that is what I've learned from it, sort of like just my behaviors of like how and when I'm using my phone. The next question is, do you feel it has been a worthy use of your time and energy or a waste of time? So far, I feel like it's been a worthy use of my time. Originally, I thought it was going to be more of like a waste of my time, but I've been able to like clear my thoughts and like I was saying earlier, like now when I'm opening up my phone to like check in using my online entry points, it's like I know specifically what I'm doing on my phone, so it's actually increased my productivity a little bit more because I'm not like BSing, getting sidetracked for other things. So sort of keeping me on track with that. The last question was, how will it influence how you approach public service leadership, if at all? And I really don't think it's going to affect how I approach public service leadership right now, because just because of the whole coronavirus and the state of everything, and with it being so digital, I don't really see myself going off the grid right now per se, but hopefully when things get back normal and we have more of a face-to-face interaction, um, it'll be more beneficial. But I guess I could also make more phone calls, since that's a line of communication that's approved under the Dr. Silard method. So I guess make some more phone calls and just try to be more approachable and relatable and have conversations with people in the public service space. And yeah, that was my take on the Screened In Heart of Darkness review this week.
I will go next, but Anthony, I like the fact that you said you're checking your phone now, because I know the last discussion you were like, what do you mean? So I'm glad, you know. So the first one is discuss with the group how you've engaged. So worth it. All right, so what I have learned from this is I've learned how to be more present, and I've also learned the consequences that I like of being in digital drift, and just the consequences of being on my phone and my devices for such a long time. Like, even when I'm communicating with other people and I'm just having, you know, I'm just conversing with them, even through the phone or in person, if I'm still always on my phone, I just feel like that conversation isn't rich. Like, I'm not really paying attention. I'm just trying to cut the conversation short so I can go and be on my phone again, you know. And I felt like I wasn't really there. I wasn't really present, and I wasn't really present in my relationships. And I know I discussed this in one of my journals, that I was having a hard time last week coming back to the Heart of Darkness challenge, because I had my notifications on for a few days because of the group presentation, and it was just notifications on, so like other people were texting me and all these other things were happening, and I still was getting the notifications. I was just really anxious, so I was checking them, and it was really hard. And we went for a walk, my fiance and I wasn't really there. And it was like, before, it was like that all the time. I'm always on my phone, like while we're walking, while we're talking, while we're eating dinner. And now, and when I was doing it and I was on that walk, now I can feel the difference. And it was just like, I don't like it. I'm not enjoying my time. I'm not enjoying our time. So I feel like that's a big thing that I learned, just the way I spend my time with other people. I think, let's see, what's the next one? I do think it's worth of my time, my energy. I really do think it's making a difference. I know my sisters keep calling me. They're like, when is this thing over? Because I text you and you're not texting me back. And I'm like, look, I'm just doing it for school, but we'll see when it's over. Like, I don't know if I'll end it when school's done, or still try to keep some of it. Just because I feel like it puts me in a better like headspace. It makes me less anxious, especially with everything that's going on. You know, it was kind of overloaded with information, overloaded with the coronavirus information and everything that's going on. It was just too much. And it was really affecting my morale. And I feel like I finally feel like, you know, I'm not going to pretend these things aren't happening. Yes, there's happening, but I can still live my life and not have to be completely consumed by it. And then how would it influence my approach to public service leadership? I think he mentioned it in the book. It kind of gives you more empathy when you're a leader, if people aren't replying to your email right away or texting you that or messaging you back right away. And I know that's like, as a leader, a lot of people think that like I send you something, you respond to me right away. Like, you know, I am your boss. We need to work on this. So I feel like that will kind of give me a little bit more empathy. Like they're doing something, you know, maybe they're not looking at the phone right now. And I can also turn to like, if it's a real emergency, I can call you. I can go to your or if I need something right now, I can go to your cubicle or to your office, or I can just go to your desk. Like it doesn't have to just rely solely on technology. And I think that's a big one. And also just the fact that he mentioned it in his videos and he mentioned it in the book, like there's certain times I can go into work, like my thought process wouldn't be to check my emails at first anymore. I know that before that's kind of the way I worked, because it kind of starts consuming your whole day, right? And it's like you're replying to everyone, you're keeping everyone up to date. And the next thing you know, you're like, I haven't done anything much today except for be on my computer and try to communicate with everyone. And so it's just kind of sitting down there and working on a project. I don't know what I'm gonna be doing yet in the future, but whatever it is, you know, if I have to get something done, I want to sit on that and work on that first, the most important, and then reach out to people or like, you know, set those online entry points. And, you know, that's when I'll check and I'll come back to you. And if it's something that you need immediately, please call me. And it's just, I don't know. So I feel like I'm going to incorporate it in my public sector leadership later on, since I don't have that role right now.
I agree with a lot of the points you made, Melinda. Was it you that had a birthday? Or I'm sorry, I've been in the heart of darkness. I haven't seen. So happy birthday to whoever had the birthdays, Keith, and was it Melinda? Okay.
Anthony was yesterday, Keith is today, and then tomorrow's me.
All right, for sure. Happy birthday, Anthony, man. Like I told you earlier, man, I've been in the heart of darkness, man. Anyways, here we go. So here are my discuss with the group, heart of darkness challenge. Okay. Okay. Well, the main thing I've learned in the Heart of Darkness Challenge is similar to you guys, just how much you use your phone and touch your phone. That's a major one. Another one is how pointless some of the apps or some of the time I've been spending on these apps actually is. And then really when we start to really add up the minutes and the hours that we spend on it. So that's just a major point that I learned from it. Let's see, what else? Also, let's see. Okay, and it, all right. Also, another major thing yesterday, I was up early in the morning reading. I had my 6-month-old daughter on my lap, and after reading the Screened In, or most of it, I've been, very conscious of my kids being on electronics and being on devices. So, so one of the something in the book stated that children under 1 shouldn't even engage at all or have any TV time. And so I have my 6-month-old daughter, and I had the TV on actually, and I had cartoons on for her. But because I was reading, she didn't look at the TV. She wasn't focused on the TV. She wanted to tear up my book. She wanted my book. So like the book mentioned, the only reason they want our phones is because we're always picking them up and looking at them, and they're interesting to us. So our kids want our phones. But I literally saw how my daughter was very interested in the book rather than the TV. So it just showed me, like, when she sees my nose in the book, it makes her interested in books. So if she sees my nose in her phone all the time, that's, and that's, I'm just starting her off on the wrong foot. So that's, that's very enlightening for me. Let's see. Do you feel it was a worthy use of your time and energy? Of course, yes, because like I said, some of the apps, some of the time I was spending was just too much. And since I've started the Heart of Darkness Challenge, I've actually, deleted a lot of apps from my phone so that it's not even something that I go to. And now that I'm conscious of it, it just makes it, gives you a little bit of freedom. And then why and how will it influence how you approach public service leadership? I would just say kind of basically like Anthony said about right now it's a coronavirus, but when we get back to face-to-face communication, that would be the main or my main mode of communication with team members or subordinates, followers, whatever it is. Face-to-face interactions when it comes to things that are most important. They would have to be done with face-to-face meetings, and you can only use emails or texts as like a supplemental form of communication. And also, like Melinda said, I wouldn't apply any pressure to anyone or wouldn't demand anyone to respond to my texts or emails promptly. It would be something that understanding, like Silard said, the empathy that you possess for your followers that realize that there might be some reasons maybe they're taking the Heart of Darkness Challenge themselves and trying to separate themselves from their devices. So basically, that's all I have.
I like your story about your daughter, Julian. That's very cool. That's a good point. I think even the Professor Silard would like hearing that. But yeah, that was cool, man. So what have I learned from it, if anything? I think the biggest thing is awareness. Just to be more aware of what I'm doing, how much time I'm spending checking my phone, asking myself why am I on the phone? What did I get on here in the first place for? And is this what I should be doing with my time right now? Is it the best use of my time? So I just think that it's kind of makes you more aware where you're at and what you're doing. Just like kind of what Julian said, it's like your kids are watching you and you're just zoning out, but they're looking at you going like, when are you going to get off that thing? So just being aware of what I'm doing. Has it been a worthy use of my time and energy? Yeah, because like I said, it makes me more aware. I question myself what I'm doing. Just stop and ask myself, if this is the best use of time. I've also kind of tried to, they talk about in the book where, you don't, and I think who was it that said, they tried, like even like driving without the music on or anything, just doing that. I did that recently, just to kind of to clear my head and everything. And plus they say that you should do that to like, if you're always driving around with music on, like if maybe there's something wrong with your car, if it's making a noise, you'll never know if you always have like your music going and all that stuff. So you might have something clanging around in your engine and you wouldn't know it because, but yeah, just trying to like, take steps like that to give yourself some more time and stop and think about, what you're doing. Let's see how I influence approach to public leadership. I think one thing would be having more intent in what I'm doing, asking more questions about why I'm doing things. Is this advancing me towards my goals? And also trying to work on distinguishing when to use electronic communication, and like kind of like what you guys were saying, when it's better to use face to face, especially when there's like an emotional element to what your message is. If you're going to be a leader, and I wrote about this in my journal, is that there's certain things and certain kind of messages that even though might be more efficient to send it electronically, you gotta stop and be more aware and think about, what is the intent behind the message that I'm saying. A lot of times you can send an email where you have one intent behind it. Maybe you're thinking, oh, I'm just going to send this quick email to somebody, and but they take it the wrong way, and they see it as like, why are you being so rude, or why are you being so brief or harsh or cold? And you're just like, I'm not. I was just trying to like send you a quick message. It was supposed to be real quick. You took it the wrong way, or like, I've actually been accused of, you go back and forth with somebody a few times in email, and so you start like using things like bold or like underline certain things where you're trying to, and in my case, I was trying to help somebody get through something, but they weren't doing the proper steps in order to allow me to help them get there. So I started doing things like underlining certain words, like, I need you to do this in order for me to help you. And then I got like pulled aside. It was like, why are you sending like rude emails and all that stuff? I'm like, I'm not. I'm like, I'm just trying to help you. But if you don't read my emails, I can't do it if you dismiss it. So, like understanding like, that, maybe in those situations, it's best to just deliver those messages in person. Obviously trying to understand that like, maybe there's some frustration on both my part and their part in terms of trying to get, whatever the task is completed. And it's hard to convey that electronically. You can only use so many smiley faces and all that stuff like that, to get your message across. Plus I don't know how professional they are, but anyway, just kind of being aware of like when to step back and say, okay, is this the best way to deliver the message? Obviously you wouldn't, if you were a boss, you wouldn't fire somebody over email. That's something that you would handle in person. So just kind of thinking along those lines of when to use it and when.
I guess I'll go. Everybody made such great points in our comments about the Heart of Darkness challenge. And I feel like, for me, what I've learned for it, just to be more present when I'm with someone. So I'm not, like, I can be in the same room with a lot of people and be on your phone, just scrolling at nothing. So now I'm kind of more present, having conversation with my kids, the husband, or just being in the room, just sitting there watching TV and not on my phone. They seem to appreciate that too. I didn't think that made like a big difference, but sorry, but they seem to be like, oh, mommy's not on her phone. And like, I'm like, oh yeah, it's charging or whatever it's doing. And they seem to appreciate the little efforts. And what was the next one? And I think it was a worthy use of my time. It just helped me kind of be more focused. And when I am on my phone, kind of like Anthony mentioned, I just do everything I need to do. I get more enjoyment at whatever I'm looking at. So it's not like I've looked all day and the same things are popping up over and over, or the same type of emails I'm reading, or junk mail, or whatever it is. So when I look at it, I'm more clear, concise, like, oh, okay, or if something I need to get to right now, I'll do it. Or if something's funny, I can enjoy it more. So I just think I just kind of enjoyed my time on my phone a little more. Like, the absence makes the heart grow fonder, so it's been gone for a while. So I'm like, yeah, I get to play with my phone. And I think I think I'm already a personable person. I think it just makes me more approachable as a leader. So they know I'm an email, but they also know I'm gonna come walk around, talk like I forgot the term for it, but Dr. Silard says like on the floor leadership, trying to be more personable. You see, send an email, maybe check up in person. I'd be like, hey, a follow up on the thing I asked you about yesterday. Like, if you thought, go and see what's going on with them, see actually how much work they have on their desk, and see what's really kind of going on. So I think it just it just helped me be more personable instead of trying to be so short, like Keith said, just send an email, send a quick message. And people do kind of read it, like Dr. Silard said, in a negative tone, even if you don't even mean it like that. Even if you don't like put all the fluff, hi, how are you? Hope your day's going well. And then, you say whatever you have to say. But yeah, but it just makes you more personable and say that in person. Like, people, because I know when I get emails when people ask, how was your day? And by the second paragraph, it asks what they really want going on. I enjoy it the first time, But like this 10th email, it's like, okay, I got stuff to do. I can't read paragraph long emails. Just get to the point. But then if they're only getting to the point, it's like you get an attitude like, dang, every time you email me, it's just like short and sweet. You don't even like ask, even though at work it depends on how the day's going. But yeah, so I think it just makes me personally be more personable. And then if other leaders see me kind of do that, or they see how the response I get from the staff, maybe I'll kind of rub off them then also. And that's it.
Okay. So what I've learned from the Heart of Darkness is that I tend to use my phones excessively on the weekends when I am not at work. So actually kind of like self-conscious now about using my phone, because I know that if I use it, like I feel bad of using it, especially on the weekends because I have more time. So I feel like it's definitely made me self-conscious to use my phone on the weekends, and I almost feel like ashamed looking at it, using it on the weekends. But has it been worthy of your time? Yes, I think that it has been worthy. I actually started reading more books. So I'm currently reading two. One of them is The Zen Life, and another one is I think it's Healing Politics. So one is political and the other one's just kind of to relax and ease my mind. And then how will you approach this in public service? I think that I'll just, like everyone has mentioned, I'll be more present. And I think it'll allow me to become more understanding and not so demanding, as you guys had mentioned. Maybe some people don't like to check their phone excessively, so I shouldn't have high expectations of other people, and I should just be understanding when it comes to them and replying. So that's basically all I had.
All right, and I believe that brings our discussion to a close. All right, I'm going to stop recording.